everyone, I'm Allie Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm doing a design for you today from the 2016 Potomac Bead Company Design Challenge. And this design won third place. It's a Knight's Diamond by Kathy Hobbs-Stones, and it features a number of different Potomac Bead Company products and some of the fun new shapes as well. If you need any of these materials to build this design, which I'm kind of doing in pieces, and I'll show you how we do it along the way, you can always shop with us at PotomacBeads.com or go to your local Potomac Bead Company location. If you need any of the materials, there's going to be little drop downs here on the left-hand side. You can click to get to any of the categories of the materials that are used in this design, or you can go underneath the video here. There's a video description that says what the video is about, and there's a little show more button. You can click the down arrows, and that'll give you links to the products as well. I am doing this piece in a number of different components. If you check out our Facebook group or on our website, our Facebook group is Beading and Jewelry Making, or on our website currently you can see the list of winners, and this was third place. It's a very elaborate design with a lot of pieces. I'm going to be showing you the basics of it, and then you can kind of create and add on as you like. This design does feature a Potomac Bead Company Rivoli in the middle of it with some crescent accents, as well as some more Potomac crystals on the sides. The Potomac Bead Company Rivoli that I'm going to be using is the Magic Wine color, and then I'm going to be highlighting it with the crescents in the metallic gold there. And you're going to use 8 of those and 1 of the Rivoli. Altogether, it's going to be held with some seed beads. We're creating 15-0 seed beads in tubes here, and there's a number of different tube lengths that you'll do if you want to do Kathy's design. I'm creating 3 tubes that I have done, and then I'm going to create the 4th tube with you, show you how to bring it all together and connect it to our faceted round trios. For the 15-0 color, I've chosen to use the silver lined salmon here in the Miyuki 15-0. To highlight that color, I've used 8-0s in the Silver Line Dark Topaz AB, which have a nice luster to match that Magic Wine Rivoli. And then lightening it up, I have some Galvanized Gold 11-0 seed beads, as well as the Pearl Ceylon 11-0 seed beads. Combined with all of these materials, I have the golden champagne crystal Rivoli that kind of pops in the middle here, and then I'll be adding it on the sides as well. In Kathy's original design, she also used some disc duos and some round duos as well. I'm going to continue with the faceted round trios as I finish this middle section and then build the side sections as well. That way, in case you only have one, they're kind of interchangeable because of the multi-holes. We'll only be using 2 out of the 3 holes on these faceted round trios as you're working with it. So you could easily switch it to the round duo or to our diamond duo as well. To hold the whole design together, I'm using 0.006 Wildfire beading thread, and this is the white color. I have my Thread Zap 2 handy because we are stopping and starting a lot of different pieces and a lot of different threads. It's nice to have that right near you. And I have a size 10 beading needle that I'm working with. Because it is working primarily with 15-0 seed beads, if you'd like to switch to a 12 size needle, you can do that as well. I'm doing the whole design on my bead on it board here. If you don't have a bead on it board, a bead mat works wonderfully, that you can use that to kind of help hold your beads and keep them from shifting around as you're working on it. Again, because I am doing a number of different components, and then we're going to sew them all together. At the very end of the project, I'm going to be using my super new glue to kind of get down all my little thread ends and to keep those down as well. To get started, I'm only going to be using my 15-0 seed beads, and I'm going to show you how to do these little peyote tubes, the peyote bars here that Kathy based her whole design on. So if you want to take your 15-0s, get about 5 feet of beading thread, which you'll be able to make a number of components with, and I'll show you how we go ahead and make these tubes. So Kathy's design brings together a number of these different tubes that are created through using peyote stitch. For the whole design that she used, she created 36 smaller tubes and then 4 of these larger tubes. The larger tubes are 20 beads in length. The smaller tubes that she created, if you look at her picture and her design online, are 10 beads long. Instead of doing a tubular peyote, she did a flat peyote, and then we're going to seam it together to make nice flat ends. To get started, you want to take your bead stopper here and add that onto your thread. It's a different bead that's not included in this particular piece of the project, and you're going to go through it 2 times, going away from this little tail that we left, which is about 1 inch long. As I said, these tubes here that we're creating 4 of are 20 beads long. So the first thing you're going to want to do is put 20 of the beads, and these are our 15-0 beads, onto your needle. Once you have your 20 beads on, because we are doing even count peyote, you just want to double check and make sure that you actually did pick up the 20. The 15-0s are small, so you just kind of want to double check your math there. Let those all drop down next to your bead stop there, and we're going to start peyote. If you haven't done peyote stitch, you may want to go ahead, stop this video, and watch the basic peyote stitch video before you get into doing this particular design. For the basic peyote, I have 20 beads on, and this is going to be the width of my peyote stitch. So this is the width of those tubes, if you can see. I'm going to do 8 rows wide of this 20 length. For this first row, I put on 20 beads, which is actually 2 rows of peyote. To start my third row, I'm going to add 1 bead at a time, skip the first bead, which would be bead number 20, and sew through bead number 19 that I put onto the project. With your needle coming out, then of bead 19, you're going to pick up another bead and sew through bead 17. Before I do that, pull tight and try to get that first bead there to sit right on top of that 20th bead. So I'm always going to be picking up a bead and sewing through the odd number bead, going back towards the stop bead. It's going to create that peyote stitch look with almost like a brick wall, with the beads kind of stepping on top of one another. So you add a bead, skip a bead from the base row, and sew through the next one in line. If you're not great at peyote or you struggle with the counts and where to go, you can pre-lay out your beads. Lay out your group of 20, which is at first 2 rows, which you put on all at the same time, and then you can lay out 10 beads at a time, which is what's going to be entered or added in each row. And again, we're going to do 8 rows total. So I'm just going to continue on here with the peyote stitch and show you the look. So there you have that start of your peyote. When possible, keep your thread on the side of the beads that you're working on, rather than bouncing kind of back and forth. When you sew, you almost want to sew through so that you're staying to the right of the thread that's already through those beads. And that's a general rule for peyote, is you can easily kind of sew to the opposite side of the thread, and that's not going to make it look quite as nice. When you are doing this first row, your first row of 10, your project may kind of zigzag a little bit. Don't worry about that. It'll correct itself as we add row 4. I'm at the end of this third peyote row, adding my 10th bead in, and it's going to bring me out the bead that I put on first right before the stop bead. To turn and come back the other way now, it's quite easy to see which beads, when you're looking at them, are sticking up. I'm going to add a bead, and I'm always going to sew through the bead that is sticking up. 1 bead at a time, not 2. and sew through that bead that's sticking up. And what that will start to appear then is that each row that you're doing here has 2 beads wide. So you can see you go from having 1 bead wide on this row to 2 beads as you add your next bead. So you're just coming down the project, and normally I would turn this so I'm not sewing towards me, but just to show you that you're going in the direction away from the stop bead and that you just were sewing up, you're turning back. If you feel more comfortable sewing away from you, you can simply flip your project like I generally do, so I know that I'm sewing away from me as I'm adding my beads. So this would be our 4th row here that we're adding. And the way to tell which row you're on is by counting those beads, counting 2 rows. You can see there's 3, and here there's 4 when you add 2 rows together, so you know that you're working on that 4th row. And as you complete the 4th row then, we're going to turn around again and come back the other way. There at the end, we completed row 4. I'm going to flip my project there, so I'm sewing away from me again, and add in row 5. Continuing to add, I'm going to add this 5th row, and then 3 more, 6, 7, and 8. So I want 8 rows wide of this peyote stitch. And when you're counting again, you can look at 2 rows, the first 2 after the stop bead, count those. It should be 1, 2, 3, 4 wide there, and 1, 2, 3, 4 wide there. You'll know that you'll have your 8 rows completed. When finishing the 8 rows of the peyote stitch, you are going to end on the opposite side of your stop bead. If you think about this now almost like a zipper, you can think that the beads, when you roll them towards one another, are going to alternate. So on this side here, I have 1 bead sticking up there, and it's going to be zigzagging along. That's how we're going to close up and create this seamless tube. If you want the tubes to be a little bit thicker, you could do that, but you want to stick to an even number so they seam up nicely. Here on the end, I'm going to roll the tube in towards itself. You can see there, and it's going to look like it is 4 wide. I'm going to go through doing that zigzag and catching the bead that is sticking up from each side, sewing from the side that's closest to me to the side that's away, making sure that your thread is kind of always staying in that little track. Again, go back to the right side and pick up the next bead that's sticking up, and then to the left side. Right side, and then left. So it's almost like you're continuing the peyote stitch and you're filling in that empty hole on the right hand side with the bead that's sticking up on the left. This is going to create a seamless tubular shape. This is also a lot of times how you're going to make toggle bars. So if you do want to make your own clasp, you can check out the video on toggles, making your own toggles. And this is very much how you make the toggle bar for your own toggles. Different than using tubular peyote, this gives a nice flat end. So that's the advantage to this, is that when you're putting it up right against another bead, it does create that flat end. So I'm going to continue sewing down here, going from right to left, picking up the bead that is sticking up on the right, and then the bead that's sticking up on the left hand side. With the 15-0s, it is a little bit challenging because they are a small bead. So if you haven't worked much with the 15s, you could easily do the same exact pattern in either a Delica 11, or you could just do it in a regular seed bead 11. So that's another option if you want to do it but not have as little of a bead to work with. The 15 does really give it a nice little dainty look, even though it's a very detailed project. So I'm going to go through here, finish up going and adding that seam. And as I come to the bottom, to the very end of that seam work, my thread is going to come out the last bead here on the bead that's next to our starting bead. Get that tail out of my way here. So when you exit your last bead, it's going to be the bead that sits right next to the bead that has the stop bead coming out of it. Pulling that stop bead away, if you want to, you can seam back up the project to kind of reinforce it, but I'm really not going to worry about that because there's not going to be that much tension actually on the peyote tube itself because we're going to be running thread through the tubes. So all I'm simply going to do to finish off my tube is take off that stop bead and tie those two ends into a nice sewer's knot, or square knot rather, sorry. Right over left, left over right. I do that so there's 3 complete knots. And then rather than gluing right away, because I am going to be stitching through some of these beads, I'm just going to take my threads up here, or your wildfire cord cutter or threads up ultra, they all do the same thing. You're just going to go right through and leave yourself a little bit of tails there on your little tubular pieces. So I have my 4 tubes, which I'm going to be connecting with my faceted round trios into that diamond shape, which is then going to hold in the middle my Rivoli. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, put all of these materials in our little tubes that we've created. You want to make sure that you make 4 in total. So repeat that same process that I just did with that 1 tubular and go through 4 of them. Put those off to the side, and we're going to get in now and create our bezel for our Rivoli to sit inside. For this, you are going to need all of your beads that you're working with, your crescents, your seed beads, your 8s, your 11s, your 15s, and your Potomac crystal rondelles. So to start out our little Rivoli bezel here with our crescents, we're going to start out with a very simple pattern to get that first initial inside row. I have put on a stop bead onto my thread. If you did cut or you have extra, you want about 3 feet to work with for this bezel so that way you don't run out of thread and have to add it. To get started, I'm going to start with my crescents. The pattern is that I'm having my crescents kind of sit up in the crescent shape with the rounded edge down. I'm going through the hole that's on the left-hand side. After the crescent goes an 11-0, and this is that pearl Ceylon, and then another crescent. After that, I'm going to pick up my 8 crystal 8, let those all drop down next to my stop bead. Repeat this pattern then 3 more times in order to get our group of 8 crescents onto our thread and needle. So again, it just goes crescent, 11 crescent, and then your 8s and your crystals on your 8. And I find it easiest sometimes with the crescents just to pick them up rather than pick them up off the bead mat. One thing you do want to check with your crescents, especially because you're only using 8 of them, make sure that both holes are open on the crescents. Anytime you have more than 1 hole in a bead, you always want to make sure, no matter what type of bead or who manufactures it, that the second hole is open. They're very tiny beads, and some error can happen during the coating process, that sometimes they're closed off a little bit. Usually you can easily open those holes with one of your needles or a little reamer. So just check that out before you get started. Once you have 3 sets, add your 4th. And remember after the crescents to end with your crystals, because we are going to round this out into a circle. The circle that we create then out of this pattern here of 4 is going to be the very interior of our crystal, and where our crystal is going to sit and line up really nicely. To get it nice and in the circle, I'm going to go back to the start of the project, to that crescent, and go through, because it's the center line, that whole thing one more time, reinforcing it. I think this is important because we are pulling it in towards the center. If you don't use wildfire and you're a fireline person, Kathy did say that she used 4 pound for this portion of her pendant. Once you're through the whole project, you want to actually come out the first 8/0 seed bead that you added while you were doing that very initial row. So you can see I'm through that first 8/0 that I added. And here's where we're going to add 5 of our 11/0 seed beads. You can see the crescents sit on an angle here. I'll try to make them cooperate for you. But as you pick it up until we add towards the back, they're really not going to stay sitting in that nice formation. We want to add 5 of our 11/0 seed beads, coming out an 8 and going into the next 8, through your crescent, through the 11, and out the next 8. I am using my galvanized gold for this section. 5 more of the galvanized gold go on, and this gets repeated 4 times, always going through the 11/0 or the 8/0, the crescents, the 11, and out to the next 8. This is going to form a little bit of a triangle almost look right on top of the crystals. Continue here with 5 more. Skipping the crystal, sewing through the 8, the crescent, 11, crescent, and 8. It's going to get you a nice diamond, which continues with that nice kind of flawless diamond design of the project. Skipping over and making sure that you're not sewing through that stop bead there. I'm sewing through the 8, the crescents, the 11, and the 8, and then we're going to sew the whole way till I'm coming out the top bead of that group of 5. So I'm coming out that 3rd bead. What I'm going to do now is actually make the connection points on which we will connect our tubes here to our round duo beads. So we're going to make a little bit of a connection point. To do that, we want to create this little tip here, add 3 more seed beads, again in that gold color, and sew back through that 3rd bead. So I'm coming out the left side here, I'm going to sew into the right side, back to the left, and also down those beads through the 8, and reinforcing that one more time the whole way till I get back to my next little diamond peak. When I pull then next to that area, coming out that top of that diamond that we created, 3 more beads go on again. So 3 more of my 11s go on. Circling around, going back through that bead, back through, all the way over to the next corner, coming out that 3rd bead in the group of 5. So I'm going to add 2 more points onto my beads here with that group of 3. As I add in these last 3, I'm going to let my needle come out after the 5th seed bead from that original base row. We're now going to take this shape that we made here, this diamond shape with the crescents, and we're actually going to add our beads into the 2nd hole, connecting to the 2nd hole of the crescents. To add in, I'm going to pick up my 15/0s, using 2 of them. I'm coming out of that gold bead there. I'm going to sew from the gold beads to the 2nd hole of the crescent bead. That's just going to connect those 15-0s to those crescents. When I'm in between the crescents where there's one white, I'm going to add 2. And that's going to add those 2 crescents between, or those 2 seed beads between the crescent. Coming out that second hole of the crescent, add 2 more of my 15s. And so right along that grouping of 5 again. Coming out that top bead there, I want to get down to that group of 5. And once I'm out that group of 5, right above the 8-0 seed bead, I add on 2 more 15s, go up to the top of the crescent, add 2 more of my Pearl Ceylon 11s, so through to the other side of the crescent. And I'm just completing this same thing the whole way around. Add 2 more 15s through that original 5 beads that we added above the crystals. And coming out those 5 beads, 2 more 15s get added, and then up to the crescent. So I'm going to continue adding that to my last 2 crescents and adding in those 15-0 seed beads. Add in the last 2 of your 15s. And to get ready for the next step, we're going to sew the whole way over and come out of the 15s before the crescent. So we're coming out of those first 15-0s that were added before the crescent. At this point, the front of the diamond is completed, and you can see it looks a little bit smaller because we're going to pull it back. It's actually a really pretty design open too, so you could do something with that possibly for yourself too with this fun open design. But to add an actual bezel set for the Rivoli to sit in, you can see some of the seed beads that we've created. I'm going to flip this over here, ignoring kind of that stop bead. And every time I'm coming out of 15-0s, I'm going to pick up 7 seed beads. Because it's to the back, you're really not going to see it, but I like it to still look polished and clean. So I am going to use my gold seed beads, and I want to use 7 of my gold seed beads as I'm working around here. So I'm coming out of a 15, and I'm going to add 7 gold seed beads. And I'm going to sew into the next set of those 15s that we just added, making sure that those seed beads sit to the back of the crescents. Give a little pull, and that's going to pull the crescents back a tiny bit. Again, add 7 more seed beads. Go to the next set of my 15s and sew through those. So I'm sewing around the whole diamond, almost in a circular fashion, adding 7 seed beads that sit towards the back of the project. We'll eventually pull these to the back and get our bezel piece in there that we'll create for our Rivoli to sit in. So continuing along the back, adding 7 seed beads between each group of our 15-0 seed beads on the back side of the crescents. Adding my last 7 beads on, I'm going to go through the last set of 15s, and then just like we did on the previous row to add that grouping of 3, I'm going to go up through 4 out of the 7 of the gold 11-0s that I added. I'm using odd count so I can create that point. So I'm going up the back of the seed beads here, making sure that I'm coming out the 7th bead. When I'm out the 7th bead, there at the point, you can see it kind of created a little bit of a rectangle in the back. I've started on the example piece just to make sure that my spacing was correct, dropping the Rivoli in so it sits right along those crescents, and we're going to pull these 7 beads towards the back and kind of create a casing for that Rivoli to sit in. In between my group of 7 seed beads, always grabbing the 4th, I'm going to add 2 of my size 11 seed beads in my pearl color. So I'm going to pinch the Rivoli into place there. Add 2 of your 11-0 seed beads in that pearl Ceylon, and skip over to your next group of 7 and catch the 4th bead. Again, you're going to add 2 of your Ceylon beads and catch that 4th bead. And you can see that then gives a little bit of point to the back. And I like the back to look finished as well. So 2 more beads go on, making sure to pick up that 7th bead, or that 4th bead, sorry, in that grouping of 7. 2 more beads go on and pick up the next row. So you can see that starting to pull in that backing there. Continue on. Right around in the circle. It's a little tricky when you do go in for the spacing if you're doing this with a different size Rivoli. So you just want to kind of get your spacing correct. Also, once you have this line done and this first grouping here around, I'm going to go back through the whole line that I just added and reinforce. So I'm sewing back through as I pull in that last bead, and you can see that tightens in that Rivoli so it's not going anywhere. You're going to pull in that whole line and sew back through the whole entire thing. So much like we did in the front of the Rivoli, the back of the Rivoli we're going to treat the same way, pulling the whole design a little bit tighter by sewing back through those whole beads again. The spacing that I figured out for the back of it, I think is your easiest bet to do when you're backing in the Rivoli. So I'm going to go the whole way around here, adding that basically row to reinforce, and then turning over and checking out the Rivoli from the front. Once you reinforce your whole back there, you're actually going to keep the thread on. And what I want to do is work my way out to one of these corners that I've created. So I'm going to go through the project, going back in through some of the beads to get up to that line. One of my pet peeves with bead weaving is seeing a lot of thread. So I don't want to see thread lines. I want to make sure that they're hidden within the bead. Once I'm at that corner, I want my thread and needle to come out one of those corner beads that we put on with those top 3 to create that little picot trim right on the edges of our seed beads there. I'm going to let this bezeled Rivoli kind of hang out and sit there for a second while we get back into adding our tubes together and kind of linking the whole thing together. The next portion that we're going to do is create our outer diamond here to connect our Rivoli to. I'm just simply have about a 12-inch piece of thread, and I'm going to just hold the end. If you want to, you can do a little stop bead, but I'm simply going to sew through the middle of one of the tubes. So I'm not actually sewing through any of the beads, I'm just sewing through the little tunnel that was created. On then goes an 11-0, a round trio through one of the exterior holes, and another 11-0. So through another one of my tubes, and repeat that pattern of the 11 through one of the exterior holes of the round trio, 11, and tube. Keep going here. We'll add a third one in. And just make sure as you're doing this that you're not sewing through any of the beads in your tubes. As I add my last little collection on here of my beads, I add my RounTrio and my 11s, and back to my starting tail, I'm going to sew through the whole thing one more time, retracing my exact thread lines. Once I have that all retraced and reinforced, I'll just tie off the ends together at the start. So I'm retracing through this, reinforcing this outer edge. This is actually, even though the RounTrios kind of want to move to the outside, we're actually going to be turning those in, and this edge that we create here is the outer edge of the product or the project. So I'm going back through and reinforcing this, and this whole project, when you look at the large design, is based on these groupings here of the tubes. So this is our first little diamond tube that we got to create. Here on the side, I want to get out one of the white beads here, and I chose to use the white pearl because I knew there was going to be a knot here. So the white pearl will hide the knot because I'm using the white thread. Taking the needle off, I'm going to go in, just pulling tightly, finishing off this diamond. Once I have the diamond finished there, taking my threads up, I'm just going to cut down a little bit on those thread ends. I have my diamond shape now, and like I said, it's pushing those RounTrios out. We're actually going to be turning them in and using those 11-0s as the exterior line of our diamond here. On the interior hole of the RounTrio then, we are going to be connecting our pendant. So you can see kind of taking shape here. We're going to be connecting the pendant to the diamond by that 11-0 seed bead here on the end that we created the picot trim, and sewing that into our RounTrio. With the thread that's coming out of your Rivoli, we're going to go in and connect it to the RounTrio. So I have my longer piece of thread that I kept on, and it's coming out of one of my 11-0s here. I'm going to add an 8-0 and sew through the opposite hole of the RounTrio. Add an 8-0. Then I'm going to sew back through that 11-0 that I'm coming out of. And that's going to hold that right in place there. Reinforcing and going back through the project, I'm going to sew back through that entire area here, right along that line, to come out at the next corner portion. So I've sewn back right along the project end, and I did go back and add some 15s in there. So I'm going to put on an 8, a 15, sew through that empty hole of the RounTrio on the outside, which will pull it to the inside, add in a 15 and an 8, and sew back through that 11 there on the corner. So that creates that cornered effect. Sewing back through my project then, I'm going to sew right down my line of my 11s, go through the 8, so I'm going to go through this 8 just to show you kind of how to get to that corner. I snake through the 8, through the 11, through the crescents, back through the next 8, and out to that picot point. When I get out that picot point, that's when I'm going to add my 8, my 15, Go through the round trio and then back down the other side. This will be my third connection here that I'm doing. So I've gone through that entire little edge of the product, gone through and adding my 8 and my 15, sewing through that round duo or the round trio hole, adding the 15 and the 8, and circle back around that last 11, and then back through the project here along the side. So I'm repeating a lot of the same steps because this is a grouping of 4 here. Pretty much anything you do the first time, you're going to repeat 3 more times. As I go in now and add my last little trim, the last thing I'll do is come around and decorate the ends of my round trio beads. So I've created this diamond shape here, and I've come through my last of my round trios, and I'm going to sew back through the project, which if you want to put on a size 12 needle, it's getting a little bit tight, and kind of wiggle your needle as you go. I'm going to sew back up to get to the top of the round trio bead. What I want to do at the top of the round trio bead then is just do a little bit of a trim in my gold color to kind of pull it all together. And then we'll create some smaller little diamonds to go on the sides. The smaller diamonds are going to be the exact same pattern as we did the large. Again, just going back to like the start of the video, instead of doing 20 tubes long, or 20 beads long for my tubes, we're going to do 10 long. You can also see there's lots of thread ends sticking out because it was so many different portions and components to the project. So you can go back in and glue down all those ends and get rid of them. On the side here of my faceted round trio, I'm going to sew from the bottom hole through the top hole and come out on the side there, making sure that you don't see any extra thread exposed. You're going to just see a tiny bit of thread right there on the side of that one faceted round trio. When I'm out the end here, I'm going to go through that purl 11-0, down the tube and out the purl on the other side. I'm going to create a little bit of an edge here with my 2 of my 11-0s with a crystal in the middle. So down through the next one and out the edge. Again, on goes an 11-0, crystal, 11-0, and down the whole way to the next edge. And that just gives that little bit of a edging there with those crystals to pull the crystals back into the design. Going the whole way around. And basically, I'm going to finish off this component then, and we're going to attach the next 2 pieces to the original crystal there at the top. As you finish off this edging, you can go in then and knot off this thread that you used and burn down some of the thread ends if you'd like. I'm not going to be sewing anymore through the tubes that we've created. We've got that first little diamond section done. So because I'm not going to be actually sewing through any of the tubes or any of the actual Rivoli portion, if you want to, you can do a little glue and get rid of some of those thread ends. With the thread that's still on here, I'm just simply going to pick up some of the thread here, go underneath and create little sewer's knots to knot off that thread. Then I'll do some extra protection by sewing it into some of the little peyote stitch there. So once I had the pendant done, we're going to go in and create 2 more of the diamonds for the sides, but I've decided to switch gears a little bit. I wanted to show the difference in 11 O's and 15 O's for the portion of the diamond. So I did an 11 O tube with 10 beads long and a 15O tube with 10 beads long, so you can see the difference here. And rather than actually create the 2 diamonds, which would be on the side here, just to show that look, you could do a variety of sizes to kind of add to its complexity. Again, Kathy did a great number of them for her wonderful piece. I'm just going to stick to the pendant portion and then going in and using these fun tubes as really the chain portion of my necklace. Going in and creating with those my rope chain here, which I'm going to do about 18 inches so that way the pendant hangs down a little bit longer, using those tubes to create it. I'm going to tie in the round trios in between with some crystals, spacing out afterwards, and then bringing in that 8O color as well on the sides. I'm going to utilize both holes of my round trios, the outer 2, and just put some of my little pink salmon color there, 15 O's on each side. To start out the chain, I have some wire protectors here in the gold color, and then just a simple gold clasp as well. You could use a button, you can use a clasp, whatever you prefer. What I'm going to do is simply come down with the wire protector, going through 2 strands, come down and string on all the little tubes that I create, and then go back up to the other side of the necklace. Once I have some of it strung, I'll show you the different pattern that I did and how actually to start and end the actual chain. To start the chain portion, I just simply have about 3 feet of my beading thread, and I've taken my thread and needle and gone through the wire protector, connecting the loop onto it there, and back through the other end of the wire protector and just tied in a knot. I will go back at the very end and reinforce this as I come back down the other side. To get to the start of the chain, you're just going to have to decide what pattern you actually want to do for the chain. So I'm going to do some of my gold and my pearl coming down, and then just have the pink kind of concentrated to the front. To start out, I'm going to start with a pattern of 3-1 with my gold beads and my pearl, and just adding 3 gold and 1 pearl onto the chain. As I get closer to the actual portion towards the front of the necklace, I'm going to start to add in my round trios. So I'll do a couple more of this 3-1 pattern just to have that little pearl look to it. And the nice thing is, because you don't use that many of any of the materials, you are going to have a bunch left. And again, I'm going to do this about 18 inches. I'm going to add some more gold beads here. And then after 10 or so rotations of this 3-1, about 8, let that fall. I'll add in my first of my 8O seed bead. I don't want the chain to be too busy, but I want to connect and add all of those colors. After the 8O, I'm going to put one of my Potomac crystals. And then I'm going to put one of my 15O seed beads. Picking up the round trio then. Oh, I'm going to put on one more of my 15s actually. Picking up the round trio then, I want to go through one of the exterior holes of the round trio. I'm going to come back down the project then, add in a second line and kind of create the V and pick up the other hole. But right now I'm just sticking to one of the exterior. I'm going to repeat the pattern on the other side using 2 15s, a crystal, and an 8. And separate it by a couple of my gold beads. Because I have the pearl first, I'll add a pearl, 3 of my gold beads, a pearl, and then repeat my pattern. Once I repeat the pattern there, adding in my round trio. Gonna let that drop. And I'll get to about 7 inches and add in about 6 inches and add my first tube in. In between my tubes, I'm also going to do the same pattern to pull the whole thing in together. Creating that nice design that this is going to hang from. I'll do one more time here, and then I'll actually go in and add one of my tubes into the mix. So I have my pattern continuing, and then I have my 4th round trio on. After the crystal, before the 8/0, I put an 8/0 on, and I'm going to put on my first of my tubes in that salmon color. After my tube, another 8/0 goes on, a crystal goes on. I'll let that fall down next to the pattern there. I want to repeat the round trio in between by adding my 2 beads, going into the 1 hole of the round trio. Mimic that pattern again, further down here, and add on my gold. And simply stringing right through that tube. Because we're going to come back and add a little bit of a pattern and a little connect to the other round trios, I am only having 1 piece of thread going through now, and when we come back, another piece will go through as well. As I get here to the center, I'm going to want to connect to the center. To do so, I'm going to put on one of my 8/0s and let that drop down. And I'm going to put on one of my pearl beads to bring that back into the front. Sew through that crystal there. And that's going to connect to the pendant portion. Just to decorate a little bit on the top of the pendant, I'm going to use a number of my 11/0 or my 15/0s here. I have 6 that I'm putting on, stringing back through that crystal in a circular fashion. That's just going to decorate the top there of that crystal and bring the design kind of all together. When I'm out the other side, then I'm just going to repeat exactly like I did in the chain here, adding the pearl color, then the 8/0, and then my tube, and working backwards just to repeat the same pattern that I did on this side here. Once that same pattern is added, I'm going to come back down and show you how we're going to connect into the faceted round trios. So here at the end of the other side, I'm simply going to pick up my wire protector, sew into the wire protector, add on my clasp, linking that right onto that wire protector, go through the wire protector and down through the clasp. Then I'm going to reinforce it by going back up through the wire protector because I'm going to be coming down the other side, and just creating 2 strands going through that. That's going to reinforce that end there. Once I have the 2 strands going through here at the bottom, I'm going to come back down the necklace, and to start out I'm just going to sew back through all of the beads that I just added till we get right to our faceted round trio. So I'm just stringing right down along that line. Making sure as you bring the thread through that the thread is actually staying in that wire protector. After you come out the crystal, you're going to add on 2 more of your 15s, and sew through the outermost hole of the round trio. That's going to center that round trio so that it sits right in between those two groups of two. Coming out of the round trio, same thing. Add 2 more 15s onto your needle and then sew back through till you come out the next crystal. And this pattern is just going to continue the whole length of the necklace there, adding in so it looks like those round trios kind of are hugged in there with those set of 2. So I'm going to continue the whole way through the necklace, adding in that extra strand by adding in 2 of my 15s through the exterior hole of the round trio and 2 more 15s. As I get to the end, I'm just going through all of the beads and then jumping over to the wire protector here and reinforcing this side as well. Because there are a lot of connection points on this necklace, and if you continue to do more of the peyote tubes to do Kathy's wonderful and detailed design version, then you'll have even more of those connections. And what you want to make sure is after you knot and kind of close all of these up, to go ahead and glue all of your little connection points, all of your little knots, and burn down those thread edges. When you burn down the thread edges, then it also sometimes can kind of fuse together and creates like a stop bead in order so that it doesn't go through your project. I'm simply going to go through, grab my super new glue to all of these little thread ends and glue just the tiniest little bit all of these threads. And I try to keep the glue on the thread rather than on the bead. And after I have it here finished getting filmed, I'll also, while it's still a little tacky and wet, move it off my bead mat so that way it does not dry onto the bead mat. Again, after those dry, I'm just going to burn down all of my little edges, and then you're going to have this wonderful pendant version of the Knight's Diamond design by Kathy Hobbs-Stones, which is an awesomely detailed design using this cool idea of the peyote tubes and that peyote tubular kind of folded over look to get that fun design. As always, if you need any of the materials, you can purchase them from me online. You can also shop at your local Potomac Bead Company store if you're lucky enough to have one near you. If you do need the materials, again, you can go back to the beginning of the video and you can go to the little links that are at the beginning that show the different product links. You can also go into the description again at the bottom of this video, hit the little show more button, and you can get more details there as well. As you see me just kind of go in and burn down the edges of these, it's been really fun to get to make other people's designs and do them as well. I'm usually doing my own designs, and it's kind of nice to take a little step back and see the wonderful things that people create and the thought process that goes into creating them and getting all of the connection points and making everything work. So it's like a fun game trying to figure out how you guys all made the different things and figure out the versions and playing around with them as well. So I've really enjoyed taking this kind of challenge on after you guys had your challenge to go ahead and make videos for all of these. So this third one here is completed in a much abridged version, but if you want the challenge, go for it. Keep creating these diamonds in the same fashion, add them together, and check out Kathy's design on our homepage on our website, or you can check it out in the contest too on our beading and jewelry making Facebook group. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and if you want to stay connected, you can subscribe to this channel. You can stay connected in that Facebook group, as well as going to PotomacBeads.com, checking out our latest products, and stay tuned for more awesome designs from designers like Kathy from the 2016 Potomac Bead Company Challenge. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have fun creating.